Hey, I'm happy to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Jack Newman. Jack is the Canadian pediatrician. He is a world-known expert in the topic of breastfeeding. His International Breastfeeding Centre in Toronto helps lots of women each year to have a smooth breastfeeding experience. And in the first video, Jack is going to make a deep dive into the topic of why breastfeeding is so challenging now and how birth practices and early postpartum procedures, standard procedures, might be not in a favor of smooth breastfeeding experience. So happy to have Jack on our channel. Please like the video, subscribe, and if you like what we do, become our patrons on Patreon. Now to Jack.
I would like to start with the quote from blog, actually, that we talked. So, and this is the quote from you. Many women who would like to breastfeed are not given the right to breastfeed their baby or the right to continue breastfeeding their baby. Could you elaborate on this thought, why you think so?
Well, this is the statement that is the basis of everything that's wrong with what's going on with breastfeeding, not only in Canada, not only in Greece, not only in Cyprus, not only in Europe and Asia. It's the basis of all the problems we have. So, for example, we have rules about breastfeeding in the first day or two after birth. An example being that a baby cannot lose more than 10% of the birth weight. If the baby does, then the baby should be getting formula by bottle. Well, I go into a lot of detail about how weighing is a very bad way of knowing if the baby is breastfeeding well or not. You can look at a baby and you can watch the baby at the breast and you can know if the baby is drinking milk well or not, or something in between. And so right from the very beginning, mothers have their choice of breastfeeding, if they wish to breastfeed, taken away from them. And at least in Canada, and I know it's true in much of the world, 10% weight loss, automatic introduction of bottles and formula, and very little help with breastfeeding. And in fact, it even goes before that, because a lot of what we do to mothers during labor and birth also interferes with how breastfeeding goes. So mothers are told, epidurals, no problem. You won't feel a thing and everything will go just fine. And the problem with that is that, first of all, the drugs used in epidurals are transferred to the babies. And so they affect how the baby reacts immediately after birth. Furthermore, so much fluid is given to mothers during labor and birth that the baby also gets a lot of fluid. And so they lose weight immediately after birth by peeing out that extra water. So we have all these things that are going on that take away the mother's right to breastfeed. I can be more, that's just in the first hours after birth, but also mothers are given medication for various reasons. And the vast majority of medications don't require mothers to stop breastfeeding. And yet mothers are frequently told that they must stop breastfeeding if they take certain medications. And this is true in a few cases, but the vast majority of drugs are okay for mothers and breastfeeding. So we have all these issues that come up with regard to, I want to breastfeed, but the system makes it so you can't breastfeed. There are also other situations that come up in Canada, where if a baby is not gaining weight well, for example, and the mother does not want to give the baby supplement, the pediatrician or the family doctor may call the child protection services and say, she doesn't want to follow instructions. And often the child protection services may take away the baby. This happens particularly in Indigenous patients or mothers. And it's really a scandal. And the people that work for the child protection services are often not well trained at all about medical issues, but particularly not breastfeeding. So we have all these issues. Furthermore, and one more thing that I will say is about when a family has broken up, where the father has, is no longer in with the mother. They often insist on mothers not breastfeeding anymore, or they insist on the getting night visits with the baby. And so, you cannot feed the baby breastfeeding at night. And that's a very important part of breastfeeding, is the night feeding. And of course, our judges don't understand that because they just don't understand it. Mm-hmm. So that's just a very quick comment on how mothers are taken away. Their right to breastfeed is taken away.
Mm-hmm. Jack, you mentioned the epidural as one of the interventions during the birth, but for example, for Cyprus specifically, and as well for many European countries, the C-section rate is quite high as well.
It's very high.
In Cyprus, it's almost 50% C-section. So does this have any effect on the breastfeeding from your experience, from any studies or research you might know?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, because women who get cesarean sections also get an epidural, although in some places they get a general anesthetic. So they're out for, maybe unable to respond properly for some time after the birth. So instead of the baby crawling up to the breast, the mother and the baby are separated. And babies are often given something to drink, usually formula, because you have to give the baby calories and liquid immediately after birth. Actually, you don't. And one of the best things that seems to work for breastfeeding is the breast crawl. So about the breast crawl. The baby is put on the mother's abdomen, and the baby is given time to crawl up to the breast and latch on. The problem with the epidurals and the cesarean sections is it becomes somewhat awkward to do this breast crawl. The epidural does not really in itself prevent the breast crawl but the effect of the medication does. And so there's that. And for cesarean section, of course, the mother's incision makes it awkward as well. But there's no reason a baby cannot be put right skin to skin with the mother, close to the breast, and the baby allowed to latch on. But again, the baby is affected by medication that the mother receives. So there are issues there. Look, I'm a man, I've never given birth. So, it's not up to me to say, no, you must not have anything for pain during labor and birth. But I think that if many mothers would, if they understood the effects, might say, well, maybe I'll give it I will try without. Mm-hmm. And we have now mothers who are, I think about 4 or 5% of mothers in Ontario, where I live, have decided to give birth at home. Mm-hmm. And so that number is increasing. And I think it's because mothers are realizing that, maybe a hospital birth is not the best thing for me, mm-hmm. or the baby.
Mm-hmm. And the medical system supports this?
Yes, in Canada, yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's very nice. That's very nice. Yeah, this is very nice. So actually, the next question, which is sort of very logically comes from the conversation, is about the medical doctors, pediatricians, and all kind of medical stuff that a mother, a father could meet first days, let's say, in a hospital. So how would I understand as a parent, for example, that my pediatrician is actually pro breastfeeding? So how
or not really supportive
of breastfeeding against? Yeah. So what would be the sort of triggers that I have to really think about? Yeah.
Well, I think that from the first, we can say that most doctors, most pediatricians have had absolutely no training about breastfeeding. They know nothing about it. And they are often taught in conferences that formula, here we have these wonderful formulas, they're just as good as breast milk. And so they have this prejudice already that, breastfeeding, I don't know anything about it. Breastfeeding, I have all these mothers that run into problems with breastfeeding. I just basically say to mothers, as a pediatrician, not me, but as a pediatrician, they will say frequently, well, breastfed babies, formula-fed babies, it's all the same. They're all fine. And this is the beginning. In fact, many mothers who see the obstetrician or the family doctor before the baby is born are often told the same thing and are often given free samples of formula to start with. So it's a very strong endorsement of formula. So I think that unless the family doctor or the pediatrician actually knows something about breastfeeding, you should assume, it should be assumed that they don't know anything about breastfeeding. And so they should get good advice and good help from somebody that actually does know something about breastfeeding.
So your advice would be to basically ask for the formal, credit if somebody actually, if you have been trained.
Yes, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, the lactation consultants are supposed to know more, and they don't always actually. And sometimes they are not allowed to give the information that they know is good. So I think that learning about breastfeeding before the baby is born is probably the most important thing. And I think that this is something that can be reached. I mean, fairly easily. They can go to our website. We don't charge anything to come to our website. There are videos that show how to know the baby is drinking at the breast rather than just sucking. And I just sent 3 videos to a mother that shows, one, a baby who is drinking really well at the breast. A baby who is not drinking at all at the breast, even though latched on. And a baby who is somewhat in the middle. And once the mothers know this, because I can guarantee you that pediatricians, family doctors, obstetricians don't know this. Everything is based on weight. And if they know how to know the baby's actually drinking at the breast, then first of all, they can be reassured if the baby is drinking at the breast, or they can say, my baby's not drinking, I need help. And actually, one of the things that mothers should know immediately is that if it hurts, it's not okay. Something is wrong and it should be fixed. Not 3 weeks down the road, but now, right now, because breastfeeding is not supposed to hurt. And if it hurts, something is wrong. And if something is wrong, it can be fixed.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, for women, for couples who are probably consider breastfeeding, what how would you recommend them to prepare mentally and physically, again, way in advance before the child will be born? Because when the child is born, you sort of get in
in shock.
Yeah, shock.
And if you haven't found the proper support, you don't know what to do. You just listen to your doctor, whatever he says to you.
Yeah, well, that would be a mistake in general. So I think that the main thing is that find out in advance. And again, I recommend our website because it's got all the information that mothers need to know how to know a baby's drinking at the breast, to know how to get started with breastfeeding, to know how epidurals may affect, to know how the birth process may affect breastfeeding, and where to get help, and how to know if they know how to know, for example, that the baby is drinking at the breast or not drinking at the breast, then they don't have to listen to stuff like, well, we should weigh the baby before and after each feeding because then we'll know how much he gets. Well, that actually doesn't tell you very much at all, because scales are not so accurate. And mistakes are often made when babies are weighed on scales. So I think that we have to be very careful. This is what pediatricians believe as if it were the word of God. The weight, the scale, everything is based on that. Yeah, and the trouble is that not every scale weighs the same. We have, documented issues of where baby was weighed on one scale and weighed 2 hours later, and it was completely different weight. So how do you know if his weight is okay? This is why the 10% is nonsense, because the baby is weighed in the birthing room and then weighed again on another scale in another part of the hospital. So not all scales weigh the same. And so you can get, and besides, people make mistakes. I know that you and I, we don't make mistakes, but other people make mistakes. the baby weighs 3.6 kilos and they write down 3.4. We've seen this happen over and over and over again. We have only one scale in our clinic, but we had one baby who gained a kilo in 1 week. Can't be true. Somebody wrote down the wrong number, and this happens all the time.
Jack, and also, except of the, knowing information, I think one of the parts of preparing is mental, the expectations. And because many women now, I think the average age of giving birth might be a little bit higher than, maybe 20, 30, 50 years ago. So the expectations are, what are the healthy expectations to have around breastfeeding, and what doesn't really help?
Well, I think that, many mothers are told that formula breastfeeding are all the same, but this is clearly not true. And we have lots and lots of evidence that breastfeeding is safer, not only for the baby, but also safer for the mother, or not, I shouldn't maybe use safer, but I mean, is much, it's a health promotion to breastfeed. So we have decreases in infections in babies. This, even people who say that doesn't make any difference will usually agree that breastfed babies are protected against infections. And some of these infections are very serious. So for example, COVID, yes, mothers should be breastfeeding, right? Because it protects the baby from getting COVID. And of course, we know that babies don't get particularly sick with COVID, but they can spread it. And so it's important that mothers breastfeed. So everybody will agree generally that breastfed babies are less likely to get infections. But it's not only that. They also do better in IQ tests. They also do better in decreases in various diseases. They do better in their, they're less likely to get problems with psychiatric problems. There's all sorts of things there. And the mothers, less likely to get breast cancer the longer that they breastfeed, less likely to get ovarian cancer the longer they breastfeed, the less likely they are to have high blood pressure and high cholesterol when they're older if they breastfeed. So it's not all the same. There's a real difference. And the mothers should know this and should be working to make breastfeeding work as best possible. Now, I know that not every single mother can produce all the milk the baby needs, but the vast majority could. And the reason many can't is just because we interfere with the way they breastfeed and cause problems in getting the baby to latch on well, early introduction of bottles and all sorts of things that undermine their ability to breastfeed.